Welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we're looking at one of my favorite houses, one of my favorite topics, in fact, a House Reed. And there's lots to talk about. We're going to be talking about Howland Reed. We're going to be talking about Jojen Paste. We're going to be talking about Meera Reed, perhaps even a little bit about Howland and Ashara and all of that. This is a solo Q&A, so it's just me today. But I've got a whole load of questions from my patrons. As always, I'm going to be covering as many different things I can from the chat as you're going through. I see there's quite a lot of fantastic people already in the chat, and as I always do, moderators, thank you. You do an amazing job. I really, really appreciate what you do there in the chat each and every week. So just to sort of kick off, I did have a couple of super chats just before we went live. Morally saying just a show of love and support for all the fabulous content on IDG and the amazing stories in the well-told tale. Looking forward to more of your Tower of Joy videos, especially on Bloodraven, as well as Traveler's Guide videos. I will talk about both of them later. Thank you, Maura. I really appreciate it. And I picked up your questions as well off of Patreon. To Delphi Morphia saying, thanks, Robert. You give us something awesome to look forward to every week. Thank you. I really appreciate that as well. And then Mod Mary, this is, I think, is a good place to start. Mod Mary 1, I think I saw you in the chat as well, saying, I'm very excited for House Reed. The Cranagmen, who it was said that they were a cowardly people who fought with poisoned weapons and preferred to hide rather than fight in open battle. H plus A equals Meera. Yeah, so I will come on to all of that. Let's start picking up on this idea of I don't want to major on it because I've talked about it quite a few times. Howland and Ashara and Gianna. Lady Pushkins over on Patreon said, why do you think we have just a little bit of detail on some characters, but on others, for example, Gianna, we have absolutely none. It's like House Dane, not even a name of Arthur's older brother. Do you think Jojen and Meera have the same mother or indeed brother and sister? Well, I think there are two parts to this. And so I'll start with the sort of the bigger issue, which is why don't we have huge amounts of information about some houses like House Dane and House Reed, which is what we're talking about. And in many ways, this is a sort of a companion to the live stream I did a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, about House Dane, because they are quite similar houses in the sense that we know they're important. They clearly played a huge role in the events around Robert's Rebellion, turning at Harrenhal and so on. But we don't know huge amounts about them. Now, why George R.R. Martin doesn't give us much information on some characters, I think it's a combination of two or three things, to be honest. Sometimes it's simply a matter of actually they're not that important. He doesn't give us huge amounts of information about things that aren't important. I don't think that's the case here, but I was, for a Traveler's Guide just very recently, I was looking at the island of Leng. The island of Leng is fascinating. It really is. If you ever get a chance to check it out, check it out. But it's not important to this story. None of the characters are going to go there. None of the characters have been there. It's just a really interesting little bit of backstory. So sometimes George R.R. Martin doesn't give us information because it's not important. Sometimes he doesn't give us information because it would be quite spoiler. That, I think, is part of the case here with House Reed. And by way of context, when we say we don't know much about House Reed, we know that they're the main house in the Neck, the Cranagmen. But in terms of actual people, we don't know anything beyond the generation of Howland Reed. We know Howland. We've never met him, obviously. We've just heard of him. He's married to someone called Gianna, who, again, we've never actually met. And then we get their children, Jojen and Meera, and that's it. But when you go back, George R.R. Martin's done lots about the history of Westeros. And the characters that we see in that history represent lots of different houses. But House Reed never appears. in those histories, maybe in sort of vague name, but not in terms of actual characters. We've only got 4 named characters for House Reed at any point in history. And that is, I think, partly because giving them more would be quite spoilery, but also the third reason I think why George R. R. Martin doesn't do this is because of real world immersion. Now, this goes the same, I think, for House Dane as it does for House Reed. House Reed keeps itself to itself. And the characters that we see this world through, because everything in George R. R. Martin's world we see through the eyes of particular characters. Every chapter is from someone's point of view. And they will not have met members of House Reed. And House Reed has not played a role really in history. So why would they mention them? So actually, it's quite realistic. It's a reflection of the way that George R. R. Martin is telling the story. Similarly, with House Dane, we don't get to hear huge amounts about them or about who Arthur and Ashara's older brother was, even though he was Lord, because they seem to have gone to ground after Robert's Rebellion, very understandably so. They didn't get involved in society. They didn't go to King's Landing and get involved in the court there. They didn't go and do lots of tourneys or anything like that. They kept a very low profile. And for that reason, people simply weren't talking about them. And that, I think, is actually quite a good indication of how immersive George R. R. Martin wants us to be within his world. We do not know about House Reed because people do not talk about House Reed. House Reed are ignored. They're not known. They are given dismissive names, mudmen, frog eaters, and so on. They're not important, so people don't talk about them. So that's what's been going on, and why we don't have these the names of many other characters. The second half of that, I will pick up on this and say I don't want to major on it because I know I talk about it a reasonable amount, and I've done a couple of videos on it. Yes, I believe that Gianna, Howland Reed's wife, this is Ashara Dane. I think that what happened, I won't go into all the details. You could look at the videos, the Robert's Rebellion videos. There's a link to the playlist down in the description. I think she faked her death, and I think that she and Howland went up, and she went into hiding in the neck in a Greywater Watch. And Gianna, one of the many clues in this, Gianna is indeed a sort of a compound name of John and Lyanna. So that's a sort of a nod and an homage, and that's the kind of thing George R. R. Martin does a huge amount with names, is that he gives little nods to who they actually are. So, for example, we get Arya has the name Cat of the Canals, and then Sansa has the name Elaine, and if you add them together, Cat Elaine, they're the children of Catelyn. So that's the kind of thing he loves doing. He loves playing with names, and so I think that's just a little clue as to her true identity. I don't think, in terms of long term, that actually is going to have a huge amount of impact in the plot going forward, but I think it does show us or give us hints about what happened back at the Tower of Joy and so on. Liat Rubenfeld, yes, Rubenfeld, the phrase sure talk about the Reeds, they do, but not by name. And actually the phrase, although they're very dismissive of them, they don't talk about them in specifics. So yeah, that's there's an ongoing dispute between the phrase and the Reeds, and it's a geographical thing, because the whole point of the phrase, when you get the twins, that's a crossing across the river, and they're the only way that you can get across that river for hundreds of miles. But the neck just below that is obviously held by the Crannogmen, and they just effectively wander across it regardless. So if you are in with the Crannogmen, you don't need to worry about the phrase. And the phrase, obviously, even though they're right next door ish to so the Reeds, even though they're right next door to the Freys, they don't need to cross over with that bridge. So there's a little bit of a toing and froing there, a little bit of a history. Okay, so that's the sort of the Gianna and Howland and Lashara thing. Happy to come back to that if people ask questions and want a little bit more on that one. But we've got lots of questions on other elements to House Reed as well. Lily Mellon, let's move on to Jojen actually now. Lily Mellon says, "Hi Robert, do you think there was any significance to Jojen being killed off rather quickly in the TV series? George R. R. Martin was still fairly involved then and had passed on important information to the showrunners, but that series marked a number of character deaths which haven't happened in the books. Do we think that's a sign Jojen will amount to having little significance, or did the TV show just decide there was no time to follow the storyline?" Yeah, so at a very high level, George R. R. Martin was involved reasonably strongly in seasons 1 to 4 of Game of Thrones. He wrote an episode per season. He was on set at least once per season. He was in constant dialogue. And you can see in seasons 1 to 4, it follows pretty strongly. Yes, they missed out a few characters and things like that, but it followed pretty strongly the story, the first couple of books or so. After season 4, that's when you start getting the story sort of heading off in slightly different directions. Now, I'm not going to get into sort of the whys and wherefores or showrunner bashing or anything like that. But what it was clear is that they could not do all of the story, the 13 seasons or whatever it was that George R. R. Martin said that he would have liked from Game of Thrones, the TV series. So they did have to make some cuts. And some of those were quite big, like, for example, the character of young Griff, Fagon, was taken out, and there's a huge amount of story that's been taken out as a result of that. Some of them are a little bit smaller. And they did indeed start killing a few characters at this stage, which sort of ended their story, or perhaps in this case, just sort of didn't get into a little bit of gory detail that they didn't need to. So, for example, I can't remember if it's season 4 or 5, you get Barristan died on the show. He's very much still alive in the books. In fact, he's the person who's running Meereen in Daenerys' absence, and he's leading the defense of it when it's being sieged. So he's still very much there. That doesn't mean that he's going to carry on all the way through the stories. He probably will die at some point, but it was easier for the showrunners just to sort of cut off his story there, because his purpose in their cut down story had come to an end, because now you've got new advisors for Dany, people like Tyrion and Varys, who obviously in the books are still in King's Landing, but here they brought him over into Essos. Slight digression to bring us to Jojen. So what they did with Jojen was basically Jojen died. Now, in the books, what happened is that when they're just outside Bloodraven's cave, obviously, if you remember, there a whole load of like these kind of skeleton wights came up out of the snow and attacked them. And in the books, that did happen. Jojen got quite hurt, but Meera got him into the cave. And then it goes a bit quiet on him. He had for a while quite dark visions, dreams of the future. And then there are hints, and I think we'll probably come on to this in a little bit, but there are hints that perhaps he died as a sacrifice in order to help Bran sort of kickstart his Greenseer powers, the so-called Jojen paste theory. Now, I do subscribe to this Jojen paste. Basically, Bran, in order to sort of kickstart his powers, he has to drink this from this sort of bowl, this sort of very red kind of sappy thing, which it's kind of like hint that this is weirwood sap, but at the same time, it seems quite veiny. And the kind of hint is that maybe this is a bit of Jojen there, because all magic needs sacrifice, and if we're going to kickstart Bran's, then what's the sacrifice? So it's all a little bit icky. I think that means in the books that is his fate, and I suspect we may not know for certain, or may not be told for certain. It may just be hinted a little bit more that was what his fate was. So I think, to bring it around to sort of the initial question, should we take the fact that the showrunners killed him off as being a hint that he doesn't have the same fate? He doesn't have a sort of a long story after that in the books? Yeah, probably. I think that they just sort of cut it off a bit. But they didn't want to go into all the ickiness of Jojen paste because, well, why would you? So that's where I'm at with that one. I don't think it's necessarily always the case that if somebody dies on the show that they had to die then in the books, but I think in this case his role was to get Bran up to Bloodraven's cave, and he had fulfilled that role. So thematically, that was indeed the end of his place. Marvy78, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. It's talking about the idea that Meera was introduced first at Winterfell because their mother was Ashara posing as Deanna. So this is this is one of the hints we get, and I will go no further than hints. When we about the identity of Deanna. So when Jojen and Meera come up to Winterfell, in the books they come to Winterfell and sort of swear fealty to Bran or to House Stark, but Bran sort of took it as the representative of House Stark. I know on the show they didn't meet them until later, but they go to Winterfell in the books. And the way they come in, the way it's described, the way that they're announced is, this is Lady Meera and Jojen. And that is very, very much hints that she is the heir to Greywater Watch, and Jojen's just coming along as well. Now, that's important because she's the eldest child, she's the eldest Reed, and Jojen is younger. But according to Northern tradition, it's the eldest male who inherits. The place that is most notable where the eldest child, regardless of their gender, inherits is Dorne. And where on earth could House Reed have got this Dornish tradition from, if not from an injection of some Dornish blood into the family? Perhaps this is Ashara. So that's the theory. As I say, it's on its own, it's just a hint, but it's when you add it to all the other evidence that it kind of it suggests a thing. Greek Weirwood saying, if Ashara is still alive, how does she or her offspring fit in with the line of Danes? So the House Dane, I could draw a little thing here. House Dane, we had 4 siblings. We had the eldest, who was eldest brother, who was never named, who was the Lord of House Dane at the time of Robert's Rebellion. Then we had Ashara and Arthur, and then I always forget her name. Illyria, I think, is the youngest, a lot younger. The 4 siblings there. Now, obviously Ashara is now officially dead, so is no longer officially part of House Dane, and her offspring are not. So they would count as being with their new identity as members of House Reed, and they would inherit House Reed rather than House Dane. The House Dane line, in any event, would not have gone to Ashara and Ashara's children. It would have gone to the child of this unnamed elder brother, who is called Edric Dane, or Ned for short. He appears in the books as the new Lord of Starfall. So Ashara disappearing doesn't actually affect the succession of House Dane, but it does mean that her children if she is indeed Gianna, it does mean that her children inherit House Reed. Okay, we've got a question from Bonds. This is again about Jojen, and it's quite a long question, but I'll read it out in full because I think it's a fantastic sort of in-depth question. I've often wondered, says Bonds, whether Jojen and Meera picked the wrong Stark boy when they came to Winterfell. In the books, Jojen clearly had a green dream about the chained wolf and was sent to Winterfell by Howland to free the chained wolf. In the books, it is Shaggy Dog which is chained and not Summer. Shaggy Dog was released from his chains before Jojen and Meera arrived in Winterfell, so they may not have made the connection between Shaggy Dog and the chained wolf. Rickon is clearly having similar visions to the visions that Bran is having, and it could be seen that Rickon is more powerful than Bran by the way that he appears to be able to control Grey Wind, Summer, and Shaggy Dog when Tyrion returns to Winterfell. Rickon is also the only one of the Stark children with green eyes, a noted feature of the Greenseers. Is there anything to prove that they were supposed to free Bran and not Rickon? It might be that the old Shaggy Dog story that everyone associates with Rickon is just George R. R. Martin trying to break another of the storytelling tropes out there. So this is the kind of the short version of that question is Jojen and Meera were sent by Howland Reed ostensibly to swear fealty to House Stark. In reality, Jojen had a vision of a winged wolf that was chained to the ground. Now, he was sent up there to free this chained winged wolf. The implication was that that flight was the sort of the analogy for magic, and so being chained down was being held back from being able to unleash all the magical power. So Jojen and Meera go there with this kind of secret mission to figure out who the chained winged wolf was. Now, this takes us off into the world of Greenseer dreams, which is important in a number of ways, but is important in this area because you can have a vision of somebody in a Greenseer dream, but you just get an image of them. You don't see their face, you don't get their name, you just get a sort of an avatar, a representation of who they are. The best example of this is the three-eyed crow, which is how Bloodraven appears. He doesn't know that that's how he appears in other people's dreams. That is just how he appears because he was a crow. He was a member of the Night's Watch. 3 eyes because he's got this extra, the third eye, which is the magical eye, so it kind of makes sense as to who he is. Jojen and Meera went to Winterfell searching for the chained winged wolf. Now, the hint of all of this, obviously a wolf makes you think of the Starks. So they're looking for a Stark that has got Greenseer powers, but is that they're not unleashed yet. They haven't been released. So they go up and they decide that this is Bran. And so it is Bran that they take up to Bloodraven, north of the Wall. Rickon they sort of dispatch off to with Osha, and they sort of head off to the east, off into hiding. Now, the question is, did they pick the right one? Now, there are hints that Rickon, and we talked to, so Bonds picked up on a few of these in the question. There are hints that Rickon is actually probably more powerful than Bran, but he's younger. He's at the start of things. He's a toddler really. He's barely older than he's walking around, but only just. So it would be easy to ignore Rickon and his powers, but he seems to be the first to know that Ned died. He was down in the crypts. He claimed to have seen his father there. He seems to be able to control the direwolves in a way that is perhaps more powerful than the others. He's got green eyes. Green eyes are one of the signs, it would appear, of being a green seer. Bran doesn't have the green eyes. So it's there are lots of little hints that perhaps that's Rickon might be the more powerful. The short answer is we do not know. And it's very clear that Bloodraven had contacted Bran earlier on. We get his visions of him like trying to fly and all the rest of it. So Bran was the person that Bloodraven had been contacting. Whether he'd also been contacting Rickon, we do not know. So in that sense, they did indeed pick the right person. And in the sense that probably Bloodraven saw him ahead of the game as well. If you go back even further than that, you find that the very first proper chapter of Game of Thrones, from Bran's perspective, it's Bran who sort of hears the whispering of the wind and all the rest of it that leads them to find the dire wolf cubs and all the rest of it. So that seems to be Bran again talking. So Bloodraven again talking to Bran. So Bran does seem to be the one that was picked. Whether he was the most powerful is a different matter. What that means for the story with Rickon is not clear. What seems to happen? So he's gone off. He will come back, I am sure, like a feral child. He is there out with Osha, with Shaggy Dog, and when he returns, he's on the island of Skagos, which is known for being wild. And when he returns, he is almost certainly, I suspect, going to be very magical, wild being. I still think that he is going to be the stereotypical Shaggy Dog story, that he will, it's going to be a long story, it's going to be interesting, there's going to be a lot of digressions, but he will die in some kind of futile way. Whether it'll be exactly the same as the show, I suspect not, but I think that that's what's going to happen. So in answer to your question, Bonds, Bran was the person that Bloodraven had been trying to contact. Bloodraven, it would appear, sent the Green Dreams down to Jojen, and so they went up and they picked the person that Bloodraven was in contact with, but they may not have picked the most powerful of the two. Anime lover Nicole, thank you so much for the super chat, saying 2 questions. When do you think we will meet Howland and his wife, brackets Ashara? Loving the fact that Ashara, being Howland's wife, is now being accepted. We still don't have full proof, but I just think it's right. And do you think Meera will survive and further the Reed line? So in terms of the first question with Howland, when we're going to meet him, we'll have a few more questions on Howland a little bit later. But I think he will emerge. George R. R. Martin has pretty much confirmed that he said we're not going to meet him yet, and probably not until near the end, because he just knows too much. He's far too spoilery, which implies that we will meet him. I think he probably will come north. There is, I think I've got a question on it later, so I won't go into too much detail, and I'll pick up on this one, if that's okay, Nicole, a bit more then. But we've got Mage Mormont and Gilbert Glover have gone searching for him and into the Neck, and they will probably find him, and he will probably head north. I think he is going to be the person who's going to be delivering a lot of the information that Sam and Bran gave out on the show. Jon's parentage and things like that. I think that Howland will be the person who say, well, this is actually what happened at the Tower of Joy. Don't think it'll be the Winds of Winter. I think it will be a Dream of Spring, but I think that we will see him then. Secondly, do you think Meera will survive and further the Reed line? Yes, I do. Again, we'll talk a bit more about Meera in a moment. I think it's quite very likely that she will survive. I think that she will probably head back down to the Crannogmen. I think she'll head back down to the Neck. Whether she will further the Reed line, I think, is beyond the scope of the books. I think that we're not going to have this kind of 20 years later epilogue. We're just going to be left with here's the situation at the end of this story. So she will be in a position to further the Reed line, if that makes sense, rather than actually we'll see, oh yes, and she had lots of babies. I don't think we're going to have that level of detail. Let's have a quick flick through, make sure I've not missed any. Andrew K, yes, saying Rickon could go very dark, traumatized, taken to a hard place. Skagos, powerful walk, could be a Varamir type by the time we see him again. Yes, so we will probably see him again with probably one of the more civilized or at least good characters. We've got Davos is now hunting for Rickon, so that's probably how he's going to be brought back into the into the fold. Goblin Talk, thank you so much for the super chat. How is it possible the direwolves didn't smell Wex? That's a very good question. I will pass on that. I actually, honestly, there are sometimes, and I'll always be open to this, sometimes there are questions I do not know the answer to off the top of my head. That's one of them. What I will do, Goblin Talk, is I will go away, I will research that one. Maybe somebody in the chat will have a good answer to that one, but I will answer that one next week in the in my live stream, whatever the subject is on. Elizabeth Claire, thank you so much for the super sticker. Just saying, keep it up. I certainly am. I'm on my first pint of water. Yeah, so Carl Kosnak's asking if anyone's going to any of the cons. Just I don't tend to make a big thing of it on the channel, but I will be at Con of Thrones this year, which is in Orlando. So if anyone is going to be there, I'm sure I'll talk about it a little bit more nearer the time. But if you want to come up and say hi, I will be wandering around the corridors, and I would be delighted to meet you. That was what I found that I enjoyed the most about Con of Thrones last year, was just getting to meet people in the chat, putting some faces to some names, and just just being able to say thank you to patrons, to subscribers, to people who've supported the channel. It means so much to me. All the people here in the chat and the questions I get, it's amazing. A chance to actually meet people in the flesh. No, not everyone can make it, but if I get to meet some people, that is fantastic. So I will be there. Let's move on to talk about Howland then, properly even. We've got a few questions from my patrons on Howland Reed. First of all, Chelsea Prater, do you think there will be a Howland POV chapter? I would love there to be a Howland POV chapter. Certainly not in The Winds of Winter. Possibly in A Dream of Spring. That would be amazing, as exciting as the Melisandre one. Anyway, Morally asked, that says, there was a mention about Howland Reed visiting the Isle of Faces. What do you think he was doing there? What is his connection to the Green Men? Is he part Children of the Forest and part First Men, thus hence his size and ability to use magic? So there's a lot of questions in there. I'll try and unpack a few of them. So in terms of sort of the second half of this, the Crannogmen, they are short, they are small, there are rumors that way back in the midst of time, perhaps there was some intermarriage with the Children of the Forest. That certainly seems to kind of make sense, that magical abilities seem to be passed down between sort of from generation to generation, and they do operate a lot, as the children of the forest do, kind of staying away from combat, not getting involved in the affairs of humanity as a whole and all the rest of it. So it's entirely possible, I think probably quite likely, that way back in the mist of time, yes, there was some kind of intermarriage going on there. In terms of going to the Isle of Faces, yes. So Howland Reed is one of only a couple of people that we read about ever going to the Isle of Faces in sort of recent history anyway. Now, the Isle of Faces is the hub of the Weirwood network, as far as we can understand. I say as far as we can understand because we've never been there in the books. We just have sort of bits of history about it. Howland paddled his way there. Anyone who's tried to go to the Isle of Faces before that was basically turned back by some kind of combination of the wind or birds flying at the sails, or the currents taking them away, or something natural worldy pushed them away and prevented them getting to the Isle of Faces. Howland, however, made it to the Isle of Faces. The clear implication is that the Weirwood network as a whole, the Green Men, who are this kind of legendary ancient order who apparently are supposed to be guarding the Isle of Faces, they were all happy for him to be coming. Indeed, the clear implication is that they kind of called him to come there. So that seems to be why he was there. He was there, we're told, for a season. Now, this is obviously a Planetos season, so we shouldn't just think of this as being a couple of months. He was there, it would appear, for a winter, which was 2 or 3 years, perhaps. He was there for a long time. And he was there immediately before Robert's Rebellion. And he left just when there was this, it was called the Year of the Full Spring. Now, what happened at a very high level, very suspiciously, is that we've got all this winter, and then suddenly, oh, it's glorious spring. Everybody gets excited. They had a big tourney at Harrenhal. Everybody gets invited. So everybody comes together who needs to come together from Bloodraven's perspective. And then after the tourney is finished, suddenly, straight back to winter again. So this was a full spring. It was just like, it's almost as if a few months had been granted in order to achieve the things that needed to happen. And the things that needed to happen seemed to be Rhaegar and Lyanna getting together, meeting, a whole load of people having to make contact, and Ned and Howland Reed and so on. That seems far, far, far too convenient and suspicious that Howland Reed should be there with the masters of nature magic, as it were, literally just a few miles away. The Isle of Faces is just, it's in the middle of the lake which Harrenhal is next to. So he just like then paddled his way across the lake from the Isle of Faces to Harrenhal, where this tourney suddenly was. So that seems to be what was going on there. Now, I am going to do the last big video in my Robert's Rebellion Tower of Joy series, is looking at the role of particularly Bloodraven, but also Howland Reed across all of this period. How were they manipulating events from behind the scenes? This, I think, is one of the key things that they were doing. And I think Howland was there effectively. He was plugging himself into the Weirwood network. And then for the rest of that period, he was Bloodraven's man on the ground, doing what Bloodraven wanted. So that's my sort of grand conspiracy theory about what was going on. Do look out for the video. My hope is that I will get that video out before Westworld Season 3. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, because the trailer has just dropped and I'm very excited. But hopefully in the next couple of weeks or so, I'll be able to get maybe the first part of that. I might have to break that video down into two. how Bloodraven and Howland Reed were just behind the scenes maneuvering everybody and everything in Robert's Rebellion. Howland's little sister from Patreon, appropriate name for this, says, I feel that the Isle of Faces will be a pivotal place for storylines to come together and answers to be forthcoming. I think Howland Reed will hold the smoking gun and shed light on numerous questions that are lingering in the dark. What do you want us to learn from Howland Reed? Yeah. So this is absolutely true. I think that this is what it is. I think in terms of him, when he comes to the fore, as I've said, I think that he will be the person who will tell us what happened with the Tower of Joy, who Jon's parents are, and all of that. I think that is his primary role there. I think the Isle of Faces, more broadly, though, will play a bigger role in the books than it did on the show. This is thematically in the books, the hub of the entire continent is these few square miles around the Isle of Faces, the God's Eye Lake, Harrenhal, and the Inn at the Crossroads. They're all right next to each other, and so much of what happens is focused in and around there. The turning at Harrenhal, so much happened there. We get that Rhaegar and Lyanna met up. He abducted her, depending on which way you want to view it, from near Harrenhal. I suspect that was at the Inn of the Crossroads. Howland obviously went to the Isle of Faces. You get the Tyrion abduction by Catelyn. That happens at the Inn at the Crossroads. There are so many things that happen in and around that area. And I suspect that that will be the heart of the denouement of this story, because that is the hub of the Weirwood network. That I think we've been getting hints in Fire and Blood about dragons fighting above it and all the rest of it. I think that this is where a lot of the story will come to a conclusion. Jennifer McManus Stillwell saying, what role do you think Bloodraven wanted Howland to play in the books? And do you think Bloodraven orchestrated Howland and Ashara getting together to create Meera and Jojen? Well, I think this is the next level. Clearly Bloodraven was influencing events. Did he influence Howland and Ashara to get together? I mean, I don't honestly have any evidence for it or against it, but it does kind of make sense. I think that if you're looking at the what good comes out of it, then an awful lot of good comes out of it. So it makes sense to me that yes, he probably would want that to happen, but I don't think we can definitely say that. I think my dog's at the door. Actually, I'm just wondering whether or not I need to let him in. Hang on one moment, people. Sorry about that. I had to let Dan the dog in. Okay, so we've got another question from Maura Lee saying, Robb Stark sends Major Mormont and Galbert Glover to meet with Howland Reed and ask for aid in Robb's cause. Robb Stark was killed at the Red Wedding. What happened to Major Mormont and Galbert Glover? Did they make it? Yeah, so I've talked about this a little bit earlier. So basically, Robb realized that Ned Stark, his father, had always valued the House Reed and the Crannog men, and so he sent two of his most able lieutenants to go off and get the Crannog men and get them involved. Now, we don't then hear about what happens to them. Most people who go to the Neck, they don't return. So we don't know. I suspect what we'll find is that they they do find Howland Reed, and at some point, then we're going to get a group of people coming up from the Neck and heading up to Winterfell, including Howland Reed. Jeff Burst, thank you very much for the dog super sticker. Yeah, so Dan has come in and he's just lying down over there on the mat now. Charlie Bear 564, is your dog the prince that was promised? No, I'm afraid not. Dan the dog, he's being a bit camera shy. Otherwise, I would show you a picture of him. Okay, so let's, at that point, as we've had a little interruption, let's just take a moment, as I always do, just to let people know what's going on the channel over the course of the next few days and weeks. I've already name-checked the Westworld Season 3, which is something I'm very excited about. So the season will debut on March the 15th. So that's just a few weeks away. The trailer is out now, and it's a fantastic trailer. I am really excited about this. I will be covering Westworld Season 3 in full, as I did Westworld Season 2, incidentally. So I'm going to be covering that on a Sunday, 10 o'clock my time, 5 o'clock, same time as this, actually, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I will be doing a Westworld pre-show before every episode, 8 episodes in the season, and I will have on special guests each week to talk about the previous episode and what we can expect in the episode coming up. On the Monday, I'll be doing a breakdown of the episode every week. I will try my best to do at least one other Westworld video, either as a breakdown of the trailer for the next episode, or as a sort of a theory or explanation of something that's come up during that episode. So that's what I'm hoping to be doing. Do not worry, I will be carrying on doing A Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings videos all the way through the season. So there'll be at least one video of either A Song of Ice and Fire or Lord of the Rings every week, all the way through the season. And these Thursday live streams will carry on as well through the season. So I will be focusing a lot of my attention on Westworld because I love it. It's a fantastic show. If you've not seen the trailer, please do go and have a look at the trailer. This season looks like it's going to be a lot more pure sci-fi. There's a sort of a Blade Runner feel about it, not just sort of set in Westworld, but actually set out in our world. And a lot more sort of, well, watch the trailer. It's fantastic. So I will be doing a breakdown of the trailer. It'll probably be tomorrow. So if you want to check that out, that has bumped what was going to be quite an emotional moment for me. The last ever Traveler's Guide, which is the Traveler's Guide to Ashai. That is, I've got that ready. It's ready to go. I was going to do it tomorrow, but as I say, instead, I'm going to do the Westworld Season 3 trailer. So I'm going to push that back 1 week. The Traveler's Guide is something I've been doing for nearly 2 years, almost every week. It's been something I've really enjoyed doing, but we've reached the end now, and all good things have to sort of reach an end eventually. So Ashai seemed as good a place as any to end on. What I am going to do, though, is I am going to, as a thank you to my patrons, I say it with every single video of that series, that I could not have done that without my patron support. So as a thank you to my patrons, I will be doing a few bonus Traveler's Guide. I mean, they won't be full-length ones, but they will just be a few little bonus places that I missed out on. I've gone back and I thought, hey, I never did the Fist of the First Men, or I didn't quite get to do the House of the Undying. A few things like that. I will be doing bonus Traveler's Guides over on my Patreon as a thank you to my patrons. So I always say it, thank you, patrons. I cannot do what I do without your support. The other thing I would say, and sorry, link down in the description if you're interested in being a patron. There is a link down in the description. It's a way to support not just me, many creators are over on Patreon. It's a way if you just want to support someone or get access to some extra stuff, that is the best way to do it. My second channel, The Well Told Tale, is it's now a podcast. If you're interested in audiobooks, because that's what this is, it's an audiobook channel. It's me reading what I consider to be the best science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. That is now available both as a YouTube channel, again, link down in the description, and as a podcast. And I've got a separate Patreon over there. If you join before the end of the month, you get one of these shiny, beautiful bookmarks just as a welcome and thank you. And if you join at $5 or more and you leave a review on your favorite podcast provider, then you will be entered into a draw for an amazing piece of artwork, which I'm quite jealous of, but I managed to get hold of, and I will be passing on. It's based on the War of the Worlds, and it's a beautiful piece where it's the picture itself is made up from the text of the War of the Worlds. If you written teeny tiny small, it's amazing. So that's that. If you're interested in supporting the Well Told Tale, that's the place to go for that. Because reviews really are the best way to sort of push podcasts up the sort of the ratings. So that's what's going on there. I think that's all the things I wanted to say in terms of what's coming up. Mod Mary saying Traveler's Guide to the Witcher's World. I know, yeah, and some people have asked about Traveler's Guide to Middle Earth as well. These are things I am definitely thinking about, but I'm going to take a break from it for a little while, partly because I've come up to Westworld season. I just want to focus in on that. Also because it was becoming a weekly thing for me, and I want it. I want to get the renewed vision for it. So I'm going to look into that, and at some point, yes, I will be doing more travelers' guides to more places. I will just take a short break first. Okay. Let's go back to my patrons. Questions from my patrons. And let's talk about Meera now. So we've done Jojen, we've done Howland. Let's move on to Meera. Morley says, on the show, Meera took a sword from the cave. This is Bloodraven's cave, that fans believe could have been Dark Sister. Will we get to see her do this in the books? If so, what will Meera do with the sword later? Will she keep it or give it to someone as a gift? So yeah, this was something that was it was on the show when they were fleeing the cave. The Whites, the Night King, arrived, and they were trying to get out just before the Hodor moment. The Meera grabbed a sword, and it was one of these things that they did on the show. Was they kind of lingered on it for just like a second or so, a little bit longer than you would expect if it was just like her grabbing a random sword. They do this a few times on the show as a sort of a nod to the books to say, this is something significant. We know this is something significant. We're not going to cover it here, but we want you to know that we know. They did this with the Horn of Winter, for example, when it was picked up north of the wall. There's the cache of dragon glass and a horn that Sam's got there, and they kind of linger on it for a little while and then move away, and it's like them going, yep, this is important, but we're not going to cover it. Similarly, they did it with the sword Dawn. They kind of lingered on it being there, but they didn't mention it or anything else. So this is a hint that yes, this is something. Dark Sister the sword, which is one of the two Targaryen family Valyrian steel swords, probably is in that cave. Now, I did do a video on this one a long time ago, but the short version is that Bloodraven had it, and he took it with him up to the wall. Actually, this is one of the things that the fandom has discovered. This fandom, Aziz and Shay, I think it was actually Shay, asked the question to George R. R. Martin at one of his Q&A events to clarify, did Bloodraven take the sword up to the wall? And George R. R. Martin clarified, yes, he did. So we know it went up to the wall. Doesn't seem to be anywhere on the wall as far as anyone can tell. And we know that Bloodraven went north of the wall and then didn't return, and he ended up in Bloodraven's cave. So the most logical place for the Dark Sister, this Valyrian steel sword, to be is in Bloodraven's cave. And if they are going to head back down south in a rush, and if they discover that there is a Valyrian steel sword, it makes sense that you grab that one. That means that Meera in the books probably will head back down south in roughly the same way, not exactly the same way, but roughly the same way as in the books, taking Bran with her and taking Dark Sister, the Valyrian steel sword, with them. Now, that would obviously be incredibly useful against the others, Valyrian steel, but the question is, what will she do with it after that? Now, there's a possibility that she just keeps hold of it herself. You want Dark Sister, instinctively, you want it to go to somebody who kind of encapsulates this name of Dark Sister, which she could do. I can't give any more evidence to this, but I love the idea. It feels right that it ends up with Arya, who is very much the embodiment of a Dark Sister, and the Valyrian, the cat's paw dagger, the Valyrian steel dagger, hasn't got as big a role in the books so far, at least, as it did on the show. So maybe she will end up with that sword then, rather than the dagger. So that's all possibility. We do not know, is the short answer. It would make sense that it stays up being used in the fight against the others, so that it stays at Winterfell when Meera gets there, that it stays there, and she passes it on. Okay, Fedra the Beloved saying, my memory is a bit fuzzy on this, but it always seemed to me that Bran's journey north with the two Reeds was foreshadowing him eventually turning on the Reeds or hurting them in some way, like when he imagines forcing himself on Meera through Hodor. Anyway, assuming Jojen is indeed dead, how do you foresee Bran and Meera's relationship evolving? Will they turn on each other? Will Bran hurt her? Now, yes, there are kind of hints here. There's a Bran has kind of like a schoolboy crush on Meera, and through Hodor, obviously he controls Hodor. Hodor has the body of a man, and it starts getting a little bit weird and sinister when he's having these thoughts about her. A lot of things to do with Bran are weird and sinister, so that shouldn't surprise us, to be honest, but there we are. Does this foreshadow that he is going to attack Meera or anything like that? I don't think so. I think that Meera will be defending him, taking on roughly the same role. Otherwise, Bran is not going to get back very easily back down to Winterfell, and I think he does need to get down to Winterfell. I think Hodor will be doing roughly what Hodor did in the on the show, not in exactly the same way, we've been told, but roughly the same way. If Jojen's gone, then who else is going to carry Bran back? It really is just Meera. So that's where we're at with her. Will he hurt her? Probably in some sort of way, like he did on the show. He hurt her emotionally rather than sort of physically harming her. I think that he is going to be sucked up within the Weirwood Tree consciousness in some way. So the Bran, the child Bran that we know, will just be a part of who he is, and so he will, and we will see, I think, quite how accurate Isaac Hempstead writes kind of portrayal of Bran as being this kind of blank, emotionless character is to the books. I mean, I'm sure he did exactly what he was told to as an actor, but we'll see exactly how well that matches across to what happens in the books. But I think that the feel that he will get, or Meera will get rejected, or will not get to play a role that she perhaps wants to play, is probably going to be right. So I think that she will get turned away, but not physically hurt. We had a question a moment ago. Somebody was saying, yes, so Squisher King's talking about Dark Sister is probably too heavy for Arya. So, yeah, Valyrian steel is lighter than other swords, than normal steel. So, and it was originally used, or the first user of it, maybe not originally, but the first user of it that we hear about was Visenya Targaryen. So it is a sword which was intended for use, or has been used by a woman. So as Arya gets older, then and as she has been trained to be fighting, I think it's entirely reasonable for her to be using Dark Sister myself. Mod Mary, thank you again for the super chat, saying, why did Robb Stark use the phrase bridge if he could have passed through with the Reeds? You mentioned the reason for the rivalry between them. Yeah, so this was, so you get he passed through, if you imagine a map here, so the neck is at the top. That's the bottom of the north, so to speak. And then on the other side of that, you get the Kingsroad passes through that, and then you get the Green Fork, I think it is, river, comes out from the neck and sort of travels down to the west of that. Now, he passed through the neck, and so he then wanted to get across, to hack across towards the Westerlands. Now, in order to do that, he could have done two things theoretically. If he'd gone into the neck and across, that would probably have not worked with all his swords, because the neck is a swamp, basically. This is how you have to kind of imagine it. The neck is not somewhere you would take an army through. It has got lizard lions in there, which are basically massive crocodiles. The ground shifts. You have to know exactly where you're going. There's floating islands. It's not the kind of place you would actually take a huge amount of people through without expecting huge amounts of losses. The Crannog men don't use horses. They don't use any of these sort of weapons of war that Robb's army would have been taking with them. It would not have been practical to get his army across to sort of the west of that in through the neck. And he was also they were kind of coming up with the plans on the go, to be honest, is the other answer to that. So the first answer is that it was actually impractical to go across the neck. Crannog men could sort of paddle across to and fro, no problems at all. But to try and get an army with all of the army supplies and all the rest of it, no, that would not have worked. The second thing was they were still trying to figure things out as they were going. What are their tactics? What are they trying to do? They were reacting to what the Lannister army were doing. And they went across the bridge with the Freys, the twins, mainly because Catelyn thought that she could get across there because her father was the liege lord to the Freys in the Riverlands. So that was why they made that decision. I hope that makes sense. It pans out quite well in the books. George R. R. Martin does think through these things, as Andrew Kay says, a lot clearer than me. Neck is not easily travelled at all, especially with a military force. Okay, so let's look at, I've got 3 or 4 more questions from my patrons, and then I'll try and pick up as many from the chat as we can. Magnus Peacock in the chat saying, is Greywater Watch the safest castle in the realm? I think it's the hardest to find in the realm. Whether that makes it safe or not is a different matter. It's probably not, as a castle, it's probably not the most secure if you do find it. But in terms of actually getting to it, no one knows where it is exactly, roughly where it is. It's on a floating island, so it does move around. So let's look at House Reed as a whole. Morley says, House Reed have yet to reveal their house motto. What do you think it is? And also in A Clash of Kings, Howland Reed sends his 2 children to repledge their loyalty to House Stark. Could you review this pledge and what you think it means for both children to swear by ice and fire? Okay, so House Reed have not yet revealed their house motto. I mean, this isn't a big shocker. A lot of houses haven't, but it's the way of these things that obviously houses that are potentially spoilery, again, like House Dane, we do not know what the house words are. The bit that Morley was referring to, and I got up the quote here because I think it's fascinating, was when Meera and Jojen do go, and they go up to Winterfell to repledge themselves to House Stark, they do it in a sort of an unprompted way. So they're not told, here's the pledge you must sign in order to show that you're loyal, Bannerman, to House Stark. They just launch into what appears to be an ancient oath of allegiance. And this is how it goes. Both of them say, to Winterfell we pledge the faith of Greywater. Hearth and heart and harvest we yield up to you, my lord. Our swords and spears and arrows are yours to command. Grant mercy to our weak, help to our helpless, and justice to all, and we shall never fail you. And then Jojen says, I swear it by earth and water. Meera says, I swear it by bronze and iron. And both of them say, we swear it by ice and fire. Now, it's that last bit that obviously catches your attention, because the amount of times that ice and fire is mentioned in Song of Ice and Fire, actually, as a phrase, actually is not that many. So when it is, we start to kind of pay attention to what's going on. This hints that on one level, yes, House Reed are very clearly central to what's going on. But also, there are hints that perhaps this is a link back to the Pact. So the Pact is what the Children of the Forest and the First Men signed to end their very, very long war. Now, they signed an agreement that was sealed at the Isle of Faces, and the speculation within the fandom is that this is perhaps some hark back to that original pact or agreement between the Children of the Forest and the First Men. That kind of makes sense to me. But it also kind of makes sense to me, this link across to Bloodraven. Now, Bloodraven is very clearly trying to marry, in some ways, a very literal sense, ice and fire, in that he is trying to ensure that the Azor Ahai Reborn, or whoever, this prince that was promised, does come from a very certain bloodline, which includes both Targaryen, old Valyrian fire, and First Men, old magic, as it were. Now, he himself his mother was a Blackwood, which is a First Men family, huge weirwood tree and all the rest of it, and half Targaryen. So that is how he is green seery as well as being a Targaryen, and he tried to make sure it appears that that bloodline, that half First Men, half Valyrian bloodline, carried on through the next few generations. Again, I will cover all of this in my How Bloodraven is Manipulating the Entire Story video, but that seems to be what he was trying to do. And if he is the one who has been in contact with Howland Reed, and Howland Reed is the one who sent his children up to House Stark, then for them to be swearing things on ice and fire links back in with this plot to create the prince that was promised, who is both ice and fire. And obviously, in this instance, it seems to be Jon, who is this kind of like, or at least that's who Bloodraven seems to have decided it is. He is ice and fire, the marriage of House Stark and House Targaryen, Lyanna and Rhaegar. So that is the kind of the link across that we seem to be getting from them there. If they're agree, we would indeed, if in doubt, blame Bloodraven. If their house words are spoilery, then yes, something to do with ice and fire, I think, would probably work really well. Chase says, "Hi Robert, hope you're having a great evening. Enjoying my tea from my Deep Geek mug right now. Yes, this is so you can plug your merch. You know, I get these questions in advance, and I still forgot to bring an Deep Geek mug with me to show off to people. What I do have is a lovely Well Told Tale bookmark, which you can get if you become a patron of the Well Told Tale. Is that good enough on plugging merch? I'm never good on plugging merch, but there's a link down in the description. Question is, what do you think is the future of House Reed? Jojen is most likely gone with the paste, but what do you think will happen to the rest of the family? Okay, so this is sort of pulling together all of the things that we've been talking about so far. So I think that Jojen, yes, Jojen, I think, is gone. I think that he was a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, which was needed in order to unleash Bran's powers as a Green Seer. Meera, I think, will survive. I think that she will help Bran down to Winterfell again, at which point her immediate role in the story will be gone, but I can't, I mean, George R. R. Martin clearly loves killing characters, but there is no plot imperative for her to die, let's put it that way. So I think that there's a good chance that she may well survive. Howland Reed, I'd love for him to survive. I would love for him to be some kind of mentor for Bran in some way. Because Bloodraven, assuming Bloodraven will go in some way, I think that he would make an excellent, if not Hand of the King, then some sort of excellent advisor for King Bran, assuming King Bran happens in the books, as I suspect it probably will. As for Gianna, Ashara Dane, I hope she just lives long and happily with Howland Reed. I think that one of the things I do like, and perhaps I'm just an old romantic, but one of the things I do like about Hound and Ashara is the fact that if this theory is true, as the evidence suggests it is, then actually we have a love story that goes right. And that is so rare in George R. R. Martin's world, but it goes right because nobody knows it happened at all. They escaped up to the neck, and they got married, they had children, and as far as we know, they lived happily for the next couple of decades. So I hope that she carries on with that. I hope that her story was not a tragic one. I hope that this is something that we can look back on and say, actually, you know what, that was a happy story. So as I say, maybe I'm just an old romantic, but that for me is one of the up points of this. Let's get, so I've got one more question. Now is a good time to drop any other questions into the chat. I've got one more question from my patrons. Bettina Charlotte Nielsen saying, "Hi, Robert. My compliments to the mods. I will pass them on. Mods, thank you so much, and compliments. I am certainly probably not the first one to think of this, but I was rereading the chapter where Bran and Co. meet Sam in the Night Fort. For those who don't really, they did do it in the on the show. So Bran and Hodor and Jojen and Meera, they are heading north of the wall. They get to the Night Fort and they're going to go under the Night Fort and through. And then that happened at the same time that Sam and Gilly and baby Sam are coming back down the other way, and they kind of meet on their way. So that's what's happening there. And Sam, they have a conversation. They have a good old chat. And Sam obviously never mentions this to Jon. That would save a lot of problems. But anyway, that's a complete digression. Sam mentions cold hands, and the first question that came, I think it was from Bran, was he green? Because he says the green men rode giant elks and some had antlers. So the question is, can Cold Hands or could Cold Hands be a green man? Howland went to the Isle of Faces, perhaps a green man. Green men, as I say, as a reminder, the green men were the protectors of the Isle of Faces, and they stayed there. They're these ancient characters, legends, as we were just saying a moment ago. Legendarily, they might ride elks, or they had horns, or something like that. Perhaps one of them came away with Howland Reed. Perhaps they headed north, all the way up north of the wall, and are now helping out Bloodraven north of the wall. Is that possible? So I like this theory. I'd love to know what people in the chat think. I'll read out any thoughts from there. I don't think that there's any particular evidence for this. It's just one of these things that it sounds quite nice. My best guess on who Cold Hands is that when Bloodraven went to the wall, he didn't just go on his own. He had his own small army, effectively, of archers. 200 of them followed him and came up with him to the wall and joined the Night's Watch at that time, which incidentally probably helped him become Lord Commander so quickly, because when there was a vote, if he had 200 people he could already rely on to be voting for him, that was quite a big swing vote. But by the by, he was no fool, Bloodraven. It's said that he went north. He may well have gone with a couple of others from his close companions. If not, then certainly others would have gone out looking for him afterwards. And my best guess is that he is one of these companions that had been with him all the way down from King's Landing, who perhaps, like we saw with Benjen, they kind of mashed up the Benjen and Cold Hand stories on the show, but perhaps he had nearly been killed and had been brought back by the magic of the Children of the Forest, and so he is the one who is basically being Bloodraven's man on the ground north of the wall, because Bloodraven can't get out and about and do stuff. So he's the one who goes out there and helps Bran and Co. as they're heading north. I suspect he was the one who buried the cache of Dragonglass and the Horn of Winter for Ghost to find, and so on. So that's what his role is. Could he have been a Green Man? Well, possibly. The imagery is similar. Let's be honest about that. But I think that the suggestion is probably, or in my mind, the most likely answer is that he is one of his original group of followers. Okay, let's have a quick look in the chat. We've got Andrew K saying, do the Reeds or any other houses in the Neck, not that we know many, have any possible familial connection to the Marsh Kings? Quite possibly. As I say, the Reeds sort of appear from nowhere. We don't know exactly when they took over as being the principal house in the Neck among the Cranach Ben. that so the short answer is probably. The Marsh Kings, for those who do not know, there were a number of petty kingdoms in the north. The Starks haven't always ruled all of the north, and when they started, there were lots of hundreds of different kingdoms dotted about the north. And then they slowly took over one after the other. One of the ones that gets name checked are the Marsh Kings. The implication is that they're down in the neck in the Crannog, with the Crannog men, and the Starks. I think they did. In fact, there was a bit of intermarrying going on there, but they bent the knee to the Starks eventually. So and stopped being kings. So maybe the Reeds were the Marsh Kings, and we just do not know that. Maybe they changed their name because they couldn't be kings anymore because there was only going to be one king in the north, the King of Winter. Tulkas42 says, "Who dishonored Ashara? Would Bran dishonor Meera?" So this dishonoring Ashara thing, this is from a chapter from the perspective of Sir Barristan Selmy. Now he's got very rigid morals about a whole load of things. So when he says dishonored, what he probably means is Ashara slept with someone at the tourney at Harrenhal. Now, the rumors were that this was Ned, but given the fact that Ned and Barristan Selmy seemed to get on really well, actually, when Ned came down to King's Landing, Barristan seemed to hugely respect Ned. It doesn't seem to have been him who Barristan Selmy thinks dishonored Ashara Dane, who he had a huge crush on, which is why he's thinking about this. My guess is that this was indeed Howland. Howland and Ashara got together at Harrenhal, and Barristan saw that as dishonoring her because he was just a mudman and she deserved so much better and all the rest of it. And there are also hints that the rumors were something happened in Ned Stark's tent. Ned Stark actually shared his tent with Howland Reed. This is the only bit of knowledge we have about anyone who was in anyone's tent, was the fact that we're told Howland Reed shared Ned's tent. That was not just an accidental bit of information, I suspect, from George R. R. Martin. So all the hints were that Ashara and Howland got together, and that's who Sir Barristan thinks dishonored Ashara. Greet Weirwood says, "I wonder if Cold Hands is the sacrifice that Bran saw in his vision of the woman with the bronze sickle." This is a vision that Bran saw when he was going back through the Winterfell weirwood tree, and he goes back in time and he sees lots of them. He sees young Lyanna and Benjen playing. He sees a woman kissing a very tall knight, which lots of people speculate is probably Sir Duncan the Tall and possibly even Old Nan. Goes back in history a lot. The oldest one, when the tree is a lot smaller, so this is probably thousands of years ago, is of a woman with a sickle who is sacrificing someone. We don't know is the short answer. We do not know who this is. My best speculation is that the reason why Bran saw this one was because this was significant and this one was important. This perhaps was the original sacrifice before the weirwood tree in Winterfell, which led to the creation of the magic of Winterfell, because whatever you think is going on in Winterfell, that is a magical castle. The crypts are magical. I've got my theories. I'm sure you've seen the videos. I think I know what was going on there. But that a sacrifice before the weirwood tree was not just a random sacrifice. That was in order to achieve some magic, to unlock some magic. So I think that's what's going on there. Let's have a quick flick through. Let's see if I can find. Dale Smith says, "Robert, how can Ashara be in Greywater when she is in Essos?" I suspect this is a link to Septa Lemore. I don't buy to the Septa Lemore theory that it's Ashara Dane. I don't see any reason why Ashara Dane having been closely involved in what was going on with Rhaegar and Lyanna and the birth of their child, why she would then so suddenly go off and support some other pretender to the throne. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't really, I don't buy into that one. Okay, I think that is probably all I'm going to do from the chat today. I will be back next week with another live stream. I haven't decided. I may try and get another guest on for next week. I haven't decided a topic, but it will be same time next week. Somewhere up here, if you're watching not live, but somewhere up here afterwards will be appearing a link to other live streams I've done with other content creators, or just open Q&As, and somewhere up here can be appearing a link to my Patreon page. Guys, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Some fantastic questions. One of my favorite houses in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. I will see you again same time next week. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again soon.